Good evening and welcome to our last panel for this evening. Our topic is starting over books, and I'm your host, Bettie Boswell. I write all kinds of things from children's books to chapter books to romance in split time to short stories. So, our panel is all about new beginnings. So I've asked each one to start our evening out with a short biography and a short description of their book. And let's start with Crissie. And Crissie needs unmuted. There you
There
go.
we go. It wouldn't let me unmute. I am Crissie Leonard. I am from Reynoldsburg, Ohio. I have been writing ever since I was little. I started in poetry, and then I just really write across every genre. I don't like to box myself in anywhere. And so I'll write across any genre I want to. I keep a lot of mine very faith-based because that's very important for me to spread the gospel in a very unique and different kind of way. I really like to do that. Published my novel in 2019 called Letters to My Father. This is a book about letters people wrote to God, wanting to know why they were going through very difficult circumstances and why they had not been delivered and why their prayers had not been answered. And the main characters are Willetta and Faith. Willetta finds the letters. Faith is a PI, she finds the people. And they set off on a journey to find out what happened from the time they wrote the letter until they show up on their doorstep. So the tagline I came up with is what happens when a letter you wrote in a time you want to forget shows up on your doorstep in the hands of strangers. And so the book has been it's been doing good. It came out before the pandemic, so the pandemic put a huge stop in everything that was happening. But I do have a script, and we are bringing it to TV. So that's what we're working on now, and we're going to self-fund it so that God stays in there the way He was intended to be in there, and that was very important for me to do. And I also, my brother passed a few years ago, very unexpectedly. So then I started writing devotional coloring books because I don't do anything in the normal kind of sense. And so I wrote devotional coloring books as a way to stay in scripture as I was dealing with mourning. And then I just published a how to write your story book and a writing prompt book because I am being a book coach with an academy in 2024, and I'm starting my own writing academy. So that's me and my book in a nutshell.
Right, thank you very much. Let's go to Felicia Ferguson, please.
Hi, y'all. I grew up pretty much everywhere in the South. Was born in Ohio, lived there for maybe 6 months, and then Dad moved us to Kansas and then to Texas and Louisiana. And then finally we settled in Kentucky on a horse and cattle farm. And then after graduation, I lived in Tennessee for a little while. And then God moved me to Florida for 10 years. And now I am out here in Colorado. So Southern Girl has just survived her first snow in 10 years. And even more surprising, I actually loved it. So very, very excited about that. I have written since I was a kid, a full-time freelance writer now as of right after COVID. So my job closed down at that point in time. So I've been doing that, and I write articles, blogs. My love is women's fiction, though. And the book that is my featured book tonight is called The Choices She Made. And it is about a young girl at 17. She is sexually assaulted and she becomes pregnant from that sexual assault. And the book itself is a dual timeline, and you follow her at 17 and then also at 30. And so at 17, she has to go through the whole process of, what am I going to do with this pregnancy? Am I going to keep the child, adopt it out, abort it? And so you follow her along through that. And then the second timeline starts in chapter 2. And you do find out that she keeps the baby, but she has to decide what to do when she is requested to testify against her rapist. and also how she's going to tell her child about her conception. So lots of hard choices, but she really digs into her faith, digs into scripture to figure out, what do I do now that my life is not anything that I expected it was going to be?
All right, thank you. And Yvonne, Mulholland Morgan.
Hi there. Well, I've lived many places. So start off, I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, even though I don't sound like it. Also have lived in Canada and in 7 different states so far. So have come at this from many different perspectives and many different areas. I did not start out ever thinking I would be a writer. It kind of happened in how God always does things unexpectedly. My husband and I, after the death of our child many years ago, 30 years ago, I felt I needed to do something, and I started doing some mission work. I've been doing that ever since, short-term mission work. And one day, kind of felt the Lord say, hey, you need to write a book about this. And so I laughed, my husband laughed, because never expected to be a writer. And then started writing. The first one was a memoir about our mission work. And then I've done a couple of devotionals, wrote some children's books as well, since I started having grandkids and thought they need to have some good Christian kids books out there. And then here recently, it's like, I've never written any fiction. And as we're learning with this, we're never too old to try new things and never too old to start something different. So got the inspiration for Gypsies for God, which is an older lady. She's in her 50s and kind of loses her way, loses her job, which is a lot of her person, that's what she bases her identity on. And she decides that, I've got to do something different. And she decides to go in search of what her godly purpose is going to be in life. Part of this book came about because with our mission work, everybody's always interested in our travels. And so I wanted to incorporate a lot of that into this book. So my main character, Kathleen, travels to about 6 or 7 different countries in hopes of finding this purpose. And she comes across a lot of different situations, and it really deepens her faith and lets her know that even at her age, and she's younger than I am at 50, God has a purpose for us. And so it was fun to write it and help my character discover what God's purpose was for her life.
Okay, thank you very much. And with the other group meetings that we had tonight and last night, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I have some prepared questions, so I will start with that, but feel free to ask other questions as we go along. Each of you think about, what is the audience, who can gain the most from your work? Is it children? Is it grown-ups? Is it a person in a certain situation? So we'll start with Crissie. Once she gets unmuted. So what audience are you trying to reach with your book, Crissie? Okay, I'm not sure if Crissie is here. Oh, she's working on that.
There we go. I'm sorry, there was a band practicing near me and it was very loud, so I just muted myself again. I'm so sorry. My book, I would say my novel is roughly age 14 and up. I don't think the younger than that would really get the premise, and there's stuff in there that they really don't need to know about at that quite young of an age. But I wrote the book mostly for 2 reasons. If you were a Jesus follower, you would want to open your Bible again. And if you weren't a follower, you would want to open a Bible, or at least be curious enough to start asking questions. So that's generally who I gear mine towards. Now, my coloring books are really any age that you can color, from little kid all the way up. The devotionals are probably more 16 years old and up than those. And the book writing it's just a guide, so it could be for anybody. But I really just want people to be curious about Jesus and the Bible, so I try to bring it in a unique kind of way.
Okay, Felicia, again, we're addressing your audience.
Sure, absolutely. This is women's fiction, but oddly enough, I have had men read this book and absolutely love it. I've brought two that I know of to tears, and because there is a very strong father figure in it. And then I've also had some teenagers read this book and really get some insights into their own faith walk, which that's my big thing is I want readers to take away growing their faith, learning who they are in God and who God is in them, and that they can rely on scripture to help them guide their paths.
Okay. And Yvonne.
I think mine is contemporary women's fiction, my feature book. And like I said, my main character is 50 and going through lots of issues in her life. And I think it will appeal to a lot of women whose kids are maybe out of the house and they're kind of wondering what's left. I know my kids are all grown and have lots of wonderful grandkids now, but you know, for a while there, it's like, okay, I'm retired now. I don't have a family at home. What is my purpose? And I think there's a lot of women that deal with that in their lives as we get a little bit older. And so I think it'll appeal especially to them. But I think anybody who's really searching for trying to find a way to connect deeper with God, to find out what He's calling them to do.
All right. And Yvonne, there was a fun question for you. How long does it take for someone Irish to have their accent transformed into Southern?
It didn't actually take long. Like so many other kids, when you're in school, if you talk different than the areas you live in, the kids make fun of you. So you adapt very quickly, I think probably a couple of years. Now, since my parents were adults when they came to this country, they're both gone now, but they never lost their accents. But I think being a kid in school really kind of forces that because you don't want to be different than anybody else.
Okay. And from my questions, what inspired you to write your featured book? So we'll go to Crissie.
I was inspired. So there's a funny story behind my book. Let me start with that first. We had a wonderful thunderstorm here in Ohio, and I had really wanted to write a sci-fi novel that I had in my mind. And so I thought, this is just a great setting. I'm just going to go ahead and write this novel. But I tell people, if you're going to do that, you certainly don't want to pray to God for him to help you put the words on the paper if you're going to do that, because it doesn't tend to work out that way. And that's what I did. And when I woke up, I had this novel that was there, and I really changed it up because I was inspired by people that had come through my life or are still in my life or circumstances I went through. And I really wanted to write a different ending for them so that they could get some type of closure for what they dealt with here. So it was inspired by a lot of people that moved in and out of my life.
Okay. How about your inspiration for the featured book, Felicia?
A lot of people ask me if I set out to write a book about sexual assault and pregnancy, and I actually did not. What came to me first was that I wanted to write a book about a woman who faced a devastating experience and used her faith to grow from it and heal from it. And so the only thing that came to me that could be the most devastating thing in a woman's life would be pregnancy from a sexual assault. I mean, you want to talk about a change, that's huge, and on so many different levels, and especially at 17. And so I actually woke up one morning from a dream of my main character walking back into the cattle auction where she was raped. And I just saw her completely walking into it. And so that the story kind of built from there.
Okay. And Yvonne?
I had written a lot of other things, the children's and the nonfiction before this book, and always had my publishers kind of say, you need to try your hand at writing fiction, excuse me, because they said in a lot of ways it helps deepen your writing skills. And it's like, okay. And it started, Gypsies for God actually started as a short story that I wrote for a competition. And as the other ladies have said, Christy and Felicia, just it kept resonating with me, and I would dream about my book and just felt God saying, okay, go write this. There are women out there that need to hear that you can find a purpose no matter what your age is and no matter what's going on in your life. God is with us and God is directing our steps. And so just kept plugging along at it. And before you knew it, it was, 70,000 words. It's like, okay, God does great things that way. It's when you're writing with God like that, it's never a chore other than when it comes to editing, which is a whole other thing. But the story itself just comes together.
Right. I have a question for Cindy or Yolanda. I see that Michael's books are also being posted here. I was not aware. Is he supposed to be part of the panel tonight?
No, he had selected not to be on the panel,
Okay.
but he is active in the chat. So if anybody wants to ask about his books, feel free to do that.
Okay. So he wants to, if you have a question for Michael about his works, you can chat. All right. So I don't see any new questions yet, so I'll go to my list. Do you have any other books in the works that you'd like to tell us about?
Mhm.
Crissie?
I have quite a few books in the works. I tend to write 3 or 4 books at a time, just because I need to get the ideas out of my mind because it's always doing it. So I'm currently working on a grief book, but it's pet grief told from the viewpoint of the pet having to leave the owner and what that's like to leave them behind. So I have that in the works, and I have a romance novel in the works, and I am also working on a old school comic book. Yeah, so when I say I go across all different kinds of places, I do. So those are the 3 that I'm limiting myself to at this time.
Yeah, I can understand that. I get called to do different things all the time.
I have a different notebook for each one, so my ideas don't intermerge together.
Yeah, well, good for you. I'm not that organized. Okay, Felicia, how about you? Do you have anything that you're working on you'd like to share? You're muted. Oh, she needs to be put back on mute. Whoever's in charge. There we go.
Thank you. I had to mute myself for just a second. So, yes, I have one book that is finished and is currently being pitched. It is set in 1995 during the Bosnian War. And it is a women's fiction book about a Air Force pilot and his nurse practitioner wife, and what happens after he ends up crashing on a clandestine mission. And there's a lot of family history backstory that they are working through. Her father was killed in Vietnam, and her mom became an alcoholic as a result of that. And so she is working through that trauma. And then he has a whole family legacy of being in the Air Force. And yet he's wondering if that's God's plan for his life, or is that his earthly father's plan. And so he struggles with trying to figure out which road to follow while he is trying to survive. And so that one is, if it doesn't get picked up by a traditional publisher, I'll indie publish it for 2025. And then currently the book that I am about 60% of the way through is really what I call my transition book. It's my move from Florida to Colorado, because it starts in Florida right after Hurricane Michael in 2018. And then the main character moves home to Colorado. To the ranch where she grew up working as a kid. And so she is a relief worker and is dealing with 10 years of basically burnout and compassion fatigue, and comes home to heal. But she comes home to a ranch that the owners are having their own drama with. An unexpected heir is revealed in a will, and he has different plans for his share of the ranch than what the rest of the family has. So a lot of the big theme on that is, how do you recover from betrayal? And and who's betrayed you?
Okay. And Yvonne, any more works in?
Yes, I have a couple. One that should be coming out sometime in the next, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, another children's book called Mary the Missionary, a Kenyan adventure. It's a young girl. My oldest grandchildren are reaching the age of 10 and 11. So I wanted to write kind of a early chapter book, and I thought that would be a fun story to share. It's about a young girl that goes on a mission trip to Kenya with her family, and just the fun things that they can learn there, and how my main character there, Mary the missionary, learns that people around the world are the same. If, we all want the same things out of life, and we all want to follow Christ. And so I've got that. And then the one I'm starting to work on, I always pray a lot about before I start a new project, because I want to be writing what God has called me to call. I do a lot of teaching actually in Kenya. I do a conference there usually once a year where I'm a guest speaker. And I had the pastor that we work with there call me and he goes, I had a dream last night. I know what your next book is. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's, which I think is very fits in with our world today. And it's going to be addressing fear. And it's probably going to be a devotional of some sort, a daily 60, 90. I haven't worked all those kind of details out, addressing fears and how we can rely on God to help us get through those.
Okay. So a question came up in the chat. In your future books, will you continue the theme of starting over? So, Crissie?
Yes, because I'm big on starting over. Everybody loves a good redemption story. And I think a lot of what people go through, I write about a lot of trauma and pain that people go through. And so you have to really redefine yourself when you start over. And that's very, very important, because I think that's gotten lost a little bit in the world today, the courage that it takes to actually do that to yourself. I mean, I'm a sexual assault survivor, and so you really have to start over. You really do have to rebirth yourself, but be consistent with what God's telling you to do. So that's a really good theme, and I like writing about that. I think everybody has a great story to tell. So yeah, for me, that's an underlying theme.
Okay, Felicia?
Probably yes, because I seem to be drawn to the romantic thread of second chance romances. And with Madeline's story, and then with the one that's coming out in 2024, that's definitely a second chance. And even the Bosnian War book, they sort of get a second chance, but a second chance as the couple. And I really like seeing how people can grow and change and then be new people, but also still have some of the semblances of the same, that they, you take the good with you, but you grow through the bad.
Okay, and Yvonne?
My next couple that I've mentioned do not kind of follow that, but I do want to get back to that because I do think it's an important topic. I have played around a lot with doing some kind of book on grief for parents who've lost children. I just have to be in the right place, and that would be a lot of starting over, because when we lost our son, you go to bed one night, you're one person, and when you have a tragedy like that, when you wake up and it's happened, you're like, nothing is the same. And so you do have to, as Crissie said, you do have to really recreate yourself in those type situations. I've got to get to a place where I'm mentally ready to write that. And I'm just, even though it's been 30 years, sometimes it's still a tough subject. So I address it in a lot of the books, but I haven't dealt with just the grief part. So I've looked at that and hopefully will at some point.
Crissie, we have this question just for you. When you write 3 or 4 books at a time, how do you keep them straight? And have you ever accidentally worked on one when trying to work on another?
Yes. So I learned very quickly that I set up characters for future books. Like I look at the really, really long picture of where I want to take people. So I don't ever want to waste a character. If I put you in a book and I have you're either in that book for a reason or you're going to be featured in another book. So I tend to sometimes work on another one when I hit that character. but I also can weave my themes in and out of each one pretty fluidly because I know where I want those characters to go. Yes, I have started one and ended up writing half of it and half of another. So that was really interesting, figuring where the break was. But like I said, I use separate notebooks for each one. Each one of my notebooks are labeled for the book. I'm an old school writer. I write it out on paper first and then I put it into the computer. I don't like to type it all on the computer first. I want to, emote the pain onto the paper. That's how I keep them straight. Now, where I place them, the notebooks tend to get lost sometimes because I don't remember where I put them sometimes. But yeah, I weave mine in and out. So if I do accidentally work on one to another, I can pull a theme in and out of those stories.
Okay. And with your publishing experience, this is from me, is it traditional? Is it self-publishing? Or what are your modes of getting a book out there? So, Crissie?
My featured novel, I did a hybrid through Westbow Press, which is a subsidiary of Thomas Nelson. So you kind of get, this is what happens in traditional publishing, and this is what you have to do in self-publishing. I really like self-publishing because I like to have control of my stories and where they can go and what they can do. And I like to maintain control of my stories and all the rights to them. So I prefer self-publishing. Not that I wouldn't do something with a publishing house. I just like to be in control with mine. I found that it was easy through Westbow Press because they did a lot of the upfront work. But when you get on the backside of traditional publishing where you have to do your own marketing, I don't know about anyone else, but I don't like the market. I just like to write stories and create them. I don't really like the marketing side. So I went and searched for someone who really does like to do the marketing side and partnered with her to do that. But I just like the flexibility of self-publishing. I want to give a lot of platforms a chance. So when I mentor other people, I can be like, this one's good, stay away from this one's fine, this is what you have to do there. So for me, it's all about the experience.
Hey, Felicia?
I'm actually hybrid published. So I have 2 books that I published through Westbow Press, like she did. And now the current book is traditionally published, and the next one coming out is traditionally published as well. And I'm shopping the 3rd one with an agent. So yeah, I see benefits of both. I really do. The self-publishing, I mean, you're still going to have to do your own marketing, whether you're traditionally published or self-published or hybrid published. And so that really, the industry has changed so much that there's just not as big a budget for traditional publishers to market the book. So the author is still going to have to do a good bit of the heavy lifting anyway. But I'm very, very big on my covers. And I've noticed a lot of self-publishing books don't have great covers. And so that's, so I was very hands-on when I did the 2 through Westbow, and got to really have some good input working with Endgame Press on the cover for choices. So I was really pleased about that. But yeah, I have feet in both worlds.
Okay, and Yvonne?
I have gone all traditional publishing. When I started this writing journey, as I said, God laid it on my heart to start writing. And it's like, okay, Lord, if you want this, I want to put this in your hands, because I worried from early on that and there's nothing wrong with self-publishing, but I worried about myself in that it would become about me and not just about God. And so I went with a publisher because I want to make sure I don't know a lot about it all. When I started, I've learned a whole lot more than I ever thought I would, but there was just something about publishing with the traditional. It just let me know that, okay, this work is something that is pretty quality, which if I self-publish for myself, I think I would be worried that it wasn't up to the same quality. This way I've got somebody checking it, somebody going through it a lot better than I could, and just gives me a lot of input. And so I like going with the traditional. Like I said, nothing wrong with it. I just know that's what worked for me.
Okay. So when you're writing, this is from the chat from Sarah. When you're writing grittier stories dealing with painful topics, do you read in that same genre thread or do you branch out? And if you do read the same genre, I'm assuming that's what they're asking. Who are your favorite authors? So, Crissie?
So when I'm writing in a specific genre, I will not read, watch anything in that drama. I won't do any of that because I don't want to be influenced by what I'm reading, because your brain is a sponge and it will soak that in, and at some point you will pull that out into your story. Now you obviously can change it, but I don't like to do anything in the genre that I'm writing in at all. I won't watch shows that are in the genre. I just won't do any of that till I'm done. So I really go into like hybrid off of social media and all of that when I'm really deep into a story, so I'm not influenced. And now, as far as reading, I'm an all kind of genre kind of person. In my genre, I love Max Lucado. He was a big influence in the way I wanted to write Christian because he's just so down to earth in what he says. I'm a big fan of T.D. Jakes, but I also love a good Stephen King book. You know, I read all things comic books. I don't do like a lot of, I don't do erotic or anything like that, but yeah, I'll read just about any kind of book.
Okay. Felicia?
When I'm writing, I'm typically not reading for some of the similar reasons that Crissie said, but also just because I need to keep my focus on my characters. Now, I've kind of broken that rule with this current book, but that's because I've been writing it as I moved, because I just moved to Colorado in June, and I started this book back in, oh goodness, April, I think, maybe even March, before Blue Ridge Christian Writers Conference. And so I had to read at certain points with this one, but usually, no, I don't read in the genre really at all. I'm more of an eclectic reader. I grew up reading fantasy and sci-fi, big Star Wars and Star Trek fan. And so I love those big space opera type themes and storylines and story arcs that where the characters kind of transform. But I read a lot of David Baldacci and a little bit of James Rollins. I don't read any Stephen King. I got scared out of my wits in junior year of high school when I had to read. It was a required reading. And so I chose Firestarter thinking that was probably the tamest of all of them. And yeah, no. So I barely even made it through his craft book called forget what it is. But I cannot read Stephen King. I can't read Harry Potter. I can't read anything like that. None of the occult and witchcraft stuff. But other than that, I'll read like some of the trade novels and like a little Sidney Sheldon here and there, just to get the flavor, because I'm big on characters and not so much plot. I'm a character writer. And so if you read across genres, you can get better flavors for your characters.
Okay, and Yvonne?
The same as far as reading while I'm writing. No, I tend to stay away from it. Generally, we drive. My husband and I are both retired, so we drive a lot of places within the U.S. When we're visiting kids or that. And so what we'll end up listening to book on tape since he's driving, he can't read. And we do a lot of the David Baldacci, those mystery spy type novels. I really enjoy those. But when I'm reading for myself, I try to read a lot of different genres as well. You just learn a lot. One of the ones, I can't think of his first name. Smith is his last name. It's #1 Ladies Detective Agency. I think he's up to 23 of those books in his series. I've read about, I think I've read them all now. I've really enjoyed those. But I like to try a lot of different things. You learn a lot from reading other things.
I'm just going to add that in my writing, I do read in the genre that I'm writing. I think it helps me think about length and style and things like that. We have one more question before we have to quit. Have any of you used the services Bowker offers to promote your books? Example, website development and marketing. If you haven't used them, maybe you have used something else. So, Crissie, marketing?
I have not used them. I developed my own website. Again, I'm a control person, so I like to create all of my own stuff. I handle all my own social media creation and all of that. The marketing, like I said, I got someone else to do that, and I just partnered with some people that will help get my word out there just because we've partnered together in the past. But I don't really focus on that part. I just want to be on the front writing, and I just pass it off to people that are better at it than I am.
Okay, Felicia, marketing.
I have not used Bowker. I've put choices in 2 different book sweeps. And then I just had my website completely redesigned. I did the first one using Squarespace, but I had Kika Designs completely go down to the code and colors and redo my website, and I absolutely love it. So I've got that, but I do all my own marketing. I love Canva. I love Crissie talks about the control of it. This gives you the ultimate control because you can design your own marketing and social media graphics. And so I really enjoy doing that and posting those. But otherwise, the current book is traditionally published, and so I got a little bit more help with that in terms of where to go with some interviews and that sort of thing. But I have a lot of friends who have podcasts or blogs, and so I just reached out to them, and then I've made new friends as I've reached out to writers who have blogs who need people to either interview or take over for a day. And so that's what I really focus on in terms of marketing, and rather than using a service to do it.
Okay, Yvonne?
Pretty much a lot of the same. With this new book, Gypsy for God, it just came out in June. I have scheduled several, I do a lot of it all on my own. I have done I've done one blog tour. I've got another one coming up in January for the book. Use Canva, BookBrush. There's a lot of great websites out there to create graphics. And then also I do enter, as much as I can, a lot of competitions to help get that information out, because if your book can win some awards, you can use that to promote it, and then the company that is offering the awards will a lot of times do some advertising for you. So a lot of it's just all, like I said, through doing it myself, my own graphics and my website, and it is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe our time is up. There was a question about a book sweep, but it looks like a lot of people have replied to that in the chat. So thank you for coming.